An act to provide for the raising and maintenance of an air force and for matters connected therewith. 1. This act may be cited as the Air Force Act, Part 1 Organization of the Air Force. 2. 1. There shall be raised and maintained, in accordance with the provisions of this Act and of the regulations made thereunder, a force, to be called the Sri Lanka Air Force, and hereinafter referred to as the Sri Lanka Air Force, not exceeding such strength as may from time to time be determined by Parliament. 2. The Air Force shall consist of A. A regular Air Force, B. A regular Air Force Reserve, and C. Such volunteer Air Force and volunteer Air Force Reserve as may be constituted under Sections 5 and 6. 3. 1. The regular Air Force shall consist of officers and airmen who are appointed or enlisted for the purpose of rendering continuous service under this Act during the period of their engagement. 2. The regular Air Force shall be organized into such corps as may, from time to time, be determined by the President. 3. Where the whole or any part of the regular Air Force Reserve, Volunteer Air Force, or Volunteer Air Force Reserve is called out on active service or for Air Force training, the officers and airmen of such reserve, force, or part so called out shall, during the period of such service or training, be deemed for all purposes to be officers and airmen of the regular Air Force. 4. The regular Air Force Reserve shall consist of officers who by order of the President are transferred to such reserve from the regular Air Force, and airmen who are transferred to such reserve from the regular Air Force in accordance with the terms of their enlistment. Enlistment. 5. 1. There may be raised and maintained, in accordance with the provisions of this Act and of the regulations made thereunder, a force of volunteers for the purpose of rendering service under this Act. 2. The force of volunteers raised and maintained under this Act shall be called the Volunteer Air Force. 3. The Volunteer Air Force shall be organized into such corps as may, from time to time, be determined by the President. 6. There may be organized and maintained a Volunteer Air Force Reserve consisting of such officers and airmen of the Volunteer Air Force or of any other unit of the Air Force as are transferred to such reserve by order of the President. 7. The whole or any part of the regular Air Force Reserve, Volunteer Air Force or Volunteer Air Force Reserve may by order of the President be called out for Air Force training with the whole or any part of the regular Air Force during any period specified in such order. 8. 1. The President shall appoint a fit and proper person to command the Air Force. 2. The person appointed under subsection 1 of this section shall be designated Commander of the Air Force. Part 2. Officers 9.1. The officers shall be appointed by commissions under the hand of the President. 2. Every office shall upon appointment take and subscribe the prescribed oath, or make and subscribe the prescribed affirmation before a prescribed officer. 3. No commission issued by the President under subsection 1 of this section shall become invalid by reason of his death or vacation of office. 10. Every officer shall hold his appointment during the President's pleasure. 11. 1. An officer of the regular Air Force or regular Air Force Reserve shall not have the right to resign his commission, but may be allowed by the President to do so. 2. An officer of the regular Air Force or regular Air Force Reserve who tenders the resignation of his commission to the President shall not be relieved of the duties of his appointment until the acceptance of the resignation is notified in the Gazette. 3. Where an officer of the Volunteer Air Force or Volunteer Air Force Reserve desires to resign his commission on any date, he shall not less than 3 months before that date Give the President written notice that he will be resigning his commission on that date. 4. Where an officer of the Volunteer Air Force or Volunteer Air Force Reserve has, in accordance with subsection 3 of this section, given notice of resignation of his commission, he shall, upon his returning to the prescribed officer, in good order, fair wear and tear only excepted, all such arms, clothing, and appointments in his possession as are the property of the Air Force, be entitled to resign his commission, A. If he is not on active service on the date of resignation specified in such notice, or B. If he is on active service immediately after the termination of such service. 12. The promotion and transfer of promotion. Officers and the grant of leave of absence to them shall be in accordance with such regulations as may be made in that behalf. Part 3. Airman 13. 1. The enlistment of persons as enlistment. Airmen shall be in accordance with the regulations made in that behalf, and shall be conducted by recruiting officers appointed by the President. 2. Every person selected for enlistment as an airman shall appear before a prescribed officer, sign an attestation paper containing the terms of his enlistment, and take and subscribe the prescribed oath, or make and subscribe the prescribed affirmation. 3. The attestation paper referred to in subsection 2 of this section shall be in the prescribed form. 14. 1. Subject to the provisions of Section 21, the enlistment of a person as an airman of the regular Air Force shall A. be for the prescribed period which shall be called the period of original enlistment, and B. be entirely for service in such force, or partly for such service, and partly for service in the regular Air Force Reserve. 2. An airman may, before the expiry of the period of his original enlistment, be re-engaged for a further period of Air Force service not exceeding the prescribed maximum period of re-engagement. 15. 1. Subject to the provisions of subsection 2 of this section, the service of an airman of the regular Air Force for the purpose of discharge or of transfer to the regular Air Force Reserve shall be reckoned from the date of his signing the attestation paper. 2. Where an airman has been guilty of the Air Force offence of desertion or of fraudulent enlistment, then either upon his conviction by a court-martial of such offence, or, if, having confessed such offence, he is liable to be tried by a court-martial. Upon his trial by a court-martial, being dispensed with by order under Section 149, the whole of his prior service shall be forfeited, and he shall be liable to serve as an airman for the period of his original enlistment, reckoned from the date of such conviction or such order, dispensing with trial, in like manner as if he had been enlisted on that date, provided that all or any part of the service of an airman forfeited under this subsection may, in accordance with such regulations as may be made in that behalf, be restored to him if he performs good and faithful service, or is otherwise deemed to merit the restoration of such service. 16. 1. The promotion, transfer, discharge and dismissal of airmen, and the grant of leave of absence to them, shall be in accordance with the regulations made in that behalf. 2. Where an airman of the Volunteer Air Force or Volunteer Air Force Reserve desires to obtain his discharge from such force or reserve on any date before the expiry of the period for which he has volunteered to serve in such force or reserve, he shall, not less than 3 months before such date, make a written request to his commanding officer for such discharge. And, if he makes such request, he shall, subject to the provisions of Section 21, be entitled to be discharged from such force or reserve on such date, upon his returning to the prescribed officer, in good order, fair wear and tear only excepted, all such arms, clothing, and appointments in his possession as are the property of the Air Force. 17. A non-commissioned officer sentenced by a court-martial to field punishment, imprisonment or detention shall be deemed to be reduced to the rank of airman. Part fixeer, Service 18. Every member of the Air Force shall, whenever ordered so to do by his commanding officer, perform such of the prescribed duties as may, from time to time, be imposed on him by that officer, and shall in addition, when he is on active service, perform any such duty as the commander of the Air Force deems necessary. 19.1. The President may, A. For the defence of Sri Lanka, in time of war whether actual or apprehended, or B. For the prevention or suppression of any rebellion, insurrection, or other civil disturbance in Sri Lanka, by proclamation or, where the circumstances render it impossible to issue, a proclamation, by order, call out on active service the whole or any part of the Air Force. 2. All officers and airmen of any such part of the Air Force as is called out on active service under subsection 1 of this section shall be deemed to be on such service until the President terminates such service by proclamation.